After 7 years, she said something that broke us. I couldn't believe how quickly everything I thought we had fell apart. Now, I'm trying to make sense of the pain, the apologies, and whether there's any chance for us to rebuild, or if it's truly over for good. I never thought it would come down to this. Sitting in a quiet coffee shop in Southeast Portland, watching the woman I loved unfold a yellow legal pad like it was her final testimony. This was Amy, my wife for 7 years, who'd always been the last person to make a grocery list or plan anything in advance. Yet here she was, bullet points and all, like she was reading off a script she'd been rehearsing for days. She looked nervous but determined. I just sipped my now-cold latte and waited. Her first point was an apology, not some half-hearted, oops, sorry kind of thing. She was genuinely sorry. Sorry for the words she'd thrown at me that had cut deeper than I ever expected. She told me it wasn't who she wanted to be, that she'd been under pressure at work and felt frustrated because I was out of town for her birthday weekend. She'd been drinking wine with her sister Laura all afternoon, and the words just spilled out before she could stop them. I asked why she had laughed after saying such hurtful things. She flinched, like I'd slapped her with my question. Said it was nervous laughter, something she did when she was uncomfortable. She admitted that Laura always brought out the worst in her. Said she was trying to seem edgy, cool even, in front of her sister. I wanted to believe her. Second point, she confessed she'd taken me for granted. The safety net I'd been in her life had made her complacent. Instead of appreciating the things I did, things she once said she loved, she had started focusing on what I didn't do, what I lacked. That cut, too. Third, the last 3 weeks of our separation had been a wake-up call. She admitted she realized how much she depended on me, not just financially, though that was a big part, but emotionally as well. She said the house felt empty without me. She'd even started talking to herself just to hear another voice. Fourth point, and maybe the hardest, she wanted to try couples therapy. She'd already found a counselor who specialized in trust issues after betrayal and had booked an appointment for next week. Would I consider it? That was her plea. I kept drinking my coffee, watching her face for any sign of the woman who'd once casually wished I was dead. Was this remorse or just a well-rehearsed act? I couldn't tell. When she finished, she folded the pad closed and looked at me directly for the first time. "What are you thinking?" she asked. I told her the truth. I was thinking about parallel universes. About how in some other reality, I never drove through that terrible rainstorm, never heard those words, and was still blissfully ignorant, still sleeping beside someone who could laugh at the thought of me dead. She started crying then, not the dramatic, sobbing kind I'd seen in her sister's living room, but quiet tears she wiped away like they were an inconvenience. I laid out my terms. Not negotiable. The separation would continue for the full 6 months we'd originally planned. No moving back in, no pretending everything was okay yet. I wasn't saying never to reconciliation, but I wasn't ready for therapy either. I needed space. She nodded through it all, absorbing each word like it was a small blow. When I finished, she asked softly, "Do you hate me?" That was the weirdest part. I didn't. I still don't. There's anger and disappointment and hurt, sure, but not hate. I told her so. She looked surprised, said she'd been telling herself I must hate her so she could shut me out completely. Said it was almost worse that I didn't because it meant I didn't care enough to feel anything that strong. That stung because it wasn't entirely wrong. The conversation ended after that. We agreed to keep communication limited to emails about the house and bills. She'd keep paying the mortgage since her name was on it, and I'd cover my share of utilities. We'd reassess everything after 3 months. When she got up to leave, she hesitated, then asked if she could hug me. I said no. She nodded like she expected it, grabbed her things, and walked out. I sat alone for another half hour, thinking about how surreal it was. To have such a clinical conversation with someone who'd held my head when I was sick, who knew every embarrassing childhood story. 7 years, reduced to bullet points on a yellow legal pad. Life went on. I extended my remote work arrangement through the end of the month. My friend Mark's spare bedroom became my new temporary home. I made it feel less like a crash pad by buying a mattress topper and hanging a few pictures. I got into a routine, morning runs, work, gym sessions 3 times a week, and dinners with Mark when we both had the time. The silent strategy seemed to be working in an unexpected way. Amy appeared to be doing some serious self-reflection. Her sister Laura messaged me a week after the coffee shop meeting. She admitted she'd been a bad influence. encouraging Amy to be brutally honest in ways that were more harmful than helpful. She said she was disgusted with herself for laughing that day. Didn't ask for forgiveness, just wanted me to know she recognized her part in the mess. I didn't respond, but took screenshots, not to hold over anyone's head, just to remind myself I wasn't crazy for feeling betrayed. Meanwhile, the financial stress was worse than I thought. Amy's friend Jenna reached out, saying Amy was struggling to keep up her lifestyle on her own income. She'd canceled her monthly yoga membership and was looking for a roommate to help with the mortgage, but didn't want to bring anyone in because she hoped I'd come back. I saw the manipulation for what it was and didn't bite. I told Jenna Amy was welcome to talk to my lawyer if she wanted to discuss finances. By day 30, something shifted. Amy's emails became less emotional and more practical. She started selling some of her nicer clothes and bags online. She got rid of her second car, the red convertible she'd insisted on buying last summer. She even mentioned she was thinking about taking classes to boost her career. It was like watching someone grow up and fast forward. And strangely, I felt proud, even though I was still determined not to be her rescuer. Day 35 was a surprise. I checked my P.O. box and found a thick envelope from Amy. Inside was a 10-page handwritten letter and a USB drive. The letter was a timeline of our relationship, from her perspective. Every major event, the good and the bad. The proposal by the Columbia River, our first big fight about spending, the miscarriage in year 3 we never really talked about, the slow shift in how she saw me. Partner, provider, obstacle. It was brutally honest in ways our conversations never had been. She admitted to resenting my contentment with our life when she always wanted more, to comparing us to her friends who were drowning in debt to keep up appearances. She confessed to flirting with a coworker named Jason last year, though she swore nothing physical happened. The USB drive had audio files, recordings of therapy sessions she'd shared with her counselor's permission. I only listened to one. It was too raw, too intimate. Hearing her dissect our marriage with a stranger, trying to explain the insurance money comment. I deleted the files and put the letter away. Not sure I'll ever read it again, but it felt wrong to toss it. Day 40 brought another twist. I ran into our neighbor, Linda, at the hardware store. She mentioned Amy had been hosting weekly gatherings at the house. Not parties, she said, but meetings. Always 6 or 7 cars out front on Wednesday nights. Curious, I parked down the block that Wednesday and watched. 7 women showed up between 6 and 6:30 p.m. around Amy's age. Some I recognized, some strangers. I didn't go near the house, but texted Jenna after, asking what Amy was up to. Jenna said Amy started a women's accountability group focused on financial literacy and breaking toxic relationship patterns. That was definitely not what I expected. Around day 45, the social media side changed, too. Laura, who'd been silent about the whole situation online, posted a long status about supporting her sister's awakening and helping her see destructive patterns. She tagged Amy, who replied with, "Love you, but this journey is mine to share when I'm ready." Suddenly, friends who'd been giving me space started reaching out, asking what was going on. Rumors spread. Some said Amy was in rehab. Not true. Others claimed I'd drained our accounts and left her broke. Also false. Some said our separation was mutual and years in the making. Partly true. I stayed quiet. Let them wonder. Day 50 was the first time I went back to the house while Amy was there. Needed to grab my winter gear from the garage. Portland Springs can still surprise you with snow. I texted Amy first, and she said it was fine. She was home, working on a project. Pulling into the driveway felt strange. The lawn was uncut, flower beds neglected, small signs of my absence. Amy met me at the door, but didn't hover. She told me to take my time and went to the kitchen, where she was painting. The house felt different, smelled different. Not like my laundry detergent anymore, but like the essential oil diffuser she always wanted, but I hated. Photos had been rearranged. Furniture moved a bit. Not a huge change, but noticeable. In the garage, my winter stuff was carefully packed. Gloves, scarf, everything labeled and organized. As I loaded the boxes, Amy came out with a mug of coffee and asked if I wanted to see what she was working on inside. No pressure. Curiosity won. I followed her to the kitchen, where she'd set up a small art studio. She was painting wooden signs with inspirational quotes, the kind she used to mock Target shoppers for buying. She seemed embarrassed, but said it was therapeutic and that she'd even sold a few at a local farmer's market. We talked for about 15 minutes. Weather, her parents' anniversary, the water heater knocking again. Normal conversation between two people who used to share everything. As I left, she said something that stuck with me. She'd been reading about grief and realized she was grieving our marriage while hoping to save it. Those two feelings fighting inside her. I nodded, said I felt the same way. It was the most honest moment we'd had in years. After that day at the house, things started to feel different. Not better, not worse, just different. Like the calm after a storm when the air smells like rain and everything feels a little raw but real. Amy and I stuck to our agreement. We kept our distance but stayed polite. Texts about bills, the mail, who was picking up the recycling. Nothing more. Sometimes it felt like we were roommates who just happened to share a history, not two people who once promised forever. Mark, my friend who let me crash at his place, became my unofficial therapist. I spilled everything. The shock of Amy's confession, the way she had laughed at the worst moment, the strange mixture of anger and pity I felt. Mark listened without judgment, occasionally throwing in a sarcastic comment to lighten the mood. You're not supposed to want to hate her, man. That's the whole messed up thing. He was right. I didn't want to hate her. It would make everything simpler. Instead, I was stuck in this limbo where I cared too much to walk away, but not enough to jump back in. Amy's transformation was the weirdest part. She went from this bitter, defensive person who snapped at anyone who asked how she was doing, to someone who looked like she was reclaiming her life piece by piece. One evening, Mark and I were grabbing beers at a local pub when my phone buzzed with a message from Amy. It was a photo of a small, succulent garden she'd started on the porch. Thought you'd appreciate the progress, it read. I smiled, even though I knew it was probably a subtle way of saying, I'm still here, and I'm changing. That week, Amy invited me to join her accountability group's open meeting. I hesitated. I wanted to see this new side of her, but wasn't sure if I could handle it. After some back and forth, I agreed. The night of the meeting, I walked into a cozy community center room. 7 women were gathered, notebooks open, sipping herbal tea. Amy introduced me quietly, then went back to leading the discussion on setting healthy boundaries. It was surreal. The Amy I knew would have scoffed at this kind of group, but the Amy in front of me was passionate, articulate, and genuinely interested in helping others heal. Afterward, a few of the women chatted with me, supportive, curious, cautious. They'd all seen Amy struggle and admired her determination. Walking home, I felt a strange sense of hope, even though the future was still uncertain. Meanwhile, the legal side of things started creeping in. Our lawyer sent over a draft separation agreement outlining custody of the dog, our mutt, Max, division of furniture, and the timeline for selling the house if things didn't work out. Amy wasn't thrilled but agreed to the terms. I was relieved. At least some things were moving forward without chaos. One afternoon, I got a call from Amy that shook me. She was at the emergency room. Her mother had collapsed unexpectedly. Amy sounded shaken, softer than I'd heard in months. I offered to come to the hospital, but she insisted she was fine managing on her own. Still, I showed up. Seeing Amy in the hospital waiting area, exhausted and pale, reminded me of why I fell in love with her in the first place. The fierce loyalty, the way she held herself together for others even when she was breaking inside. Her mom was stable, thankfully, but it was a wake-up call for both of us. That night, we talked for hours on the phone, not about us, but about family, fears, and how fragile life really was. It was the closest we'd come to connection since everything fell apart. After that, the boundaries we'd set blurred a bit. She asked me to help sort through some of her mom's paperwork, which led to more conversations about the past and what we both wanted moving forward. Still, I kept my guard up. I couldn't forget the day she told me she wished I was dead, or the months of silence and pain that followed. But I was also starting to see her as more than the sum of her mistakes. One weekend, Amy surprised me by showing up at Mark's with a dozen donuts and an apology. I know this isn't how either of us imagined things, she said, but I want to try, on my own terms. Mark laughed and told her she was brave for admitting that. We ended up having dinner together, the 3 of us, sharing stories and laughs. It was weird and wonderful all at once. Weeks later, I found myself checking my phone for her texts, hoping for small updates or a joke to break the tension. We started texting again, slowly, carefully. One night, she sent me a voice memo of Max barking excitedly when she got home. It felt like a small olive branch. As spring turned to early summer, Amy and I tentatively started planning how to co-parent Max during the separation. It was awkward at first, splitting weekends, exchanging keys, but it gave us a reason to see each other without the weight of everything else. Sometimes, we'd share a coffee and talk about nothing important: weather, Max's antics, Portland's new coffee shop openings. Those moments were precious and painful, reminders of what we had lost and maybe could rebuild. The summer in Portland was mild that year, the kind of weather that made you want to sit outside late into the evening, nursing a beer or a cup of coffee, and just breathe. But for Amy and me, the quiet moments only made the tension between us louder. Our arrangement for Max was working, mostly. Weekends with her, weekdays with me. We'd drop him off at each other's places, sometimes with a quick hug, sometimes just a nod. But beneath that fragile routine was this storm waiting to break. One afternoon, Amy called me out of the blue. "Can you meet me at the park? I need to talk." Her voice was calm but urgent. I wasn't sure what to expect, but agreed. We met under a big maple tree by the dog park. Max was happily sniffing around, oblivious to the tension. Amy took a deep breath. "I've been thinking about everything. Us, what happened, what we lost." I nodded, silent. "I know I hurt you in ways I can't fix overnight, but I want to be honest. There's someone else." The words hit me harder than I thought they would. Not because I wasn't expecting them, but because hearing it out loud made it real. "Okay," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Does he know about us?" "No, and I don't want to make it more complicated than it already is." We sat there, watching Max chase a squirrel, the awkward silence stretching between us. "I'm not sure what I want," Amy continued, "but I'm tired of pretending I have it all figured out." I swallowed the lump in my throat. Neither am I. For the first time in months, we spoke without the shield of bitterness or blame. Just two people trying to find their footing in a world turned upside down. That night, I lay awake thinking about her words, about the possibility of someone else, about the cracks in our foundation that might never be repaired. Still, a part of me hoped this new chapter might be less painful than the last. Over the next few weeks, Amy and I fell into an uneasy rhythm. Our texts became more frequent, less guarded. We traded jokes, photos of Max, and occasionally, glimpses of our fears. But then came the first real test. Amy's new guy, Jason, wanted to meet me. I wasn't thrilled, but I agreed. If she was moving on, I needed to face it head on. We met at a small cafe downtown. Jason was easy to talk to, funny in a dry way, and seemed to genuinely care for Amy. Watching them together was surreal, like watching a version of Amy that existed outside of my life. Jason wasn't a villain. He wasn't here to steal or hurt. He was just another piece in the messy puzzle. After that meeting, Amy and I tried to keep things civil. But the undercurrent of jealousy and regret was always there, lurking. One night, Amy sent me a message I wasn't prepared for. "I miss how we used to be." My heart sank. "Me too," I replied. "But we can't go back." "Maybe we don't have to." Those words spun around in my head all night. Could we rebuild? Could two people who'd broken each other so badly find a way to heal together? The answer wasn't clear. And then, out of nowhere, something happened that changed everything. I got a call from Amy's sister, Rachel. "There's something you need to know," she said, voice trembling. Apparently, Amy had been hiding more than just her struggles with sobriety. Rachel revealed that Amy's dad was seriously ill, worse than anyone had realized. Amy hadn't told me. She hadn't told anyone outside the family. That explained a lot: the late-night phone calls, the sudden mood swings, the exhaustion. It also made me realize how much we'd both been dealing with alone. I went to visit Amy that evening. We sat in her living room, the weight of her secret hanging between us. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you," she said quietly. "I didn't want you to see me as weak." I reached out and took her hand. "You're not weak. You're human." For the first time in a long time, it felt like we were on the same side. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest we'd ever faced. Between hospital visits, family tension, and our own unresolved issues, it was easy to feel overwhelmed. But amidst the chaos, Amy and I found moments of clarity, moments where we laughed, cried, and simply existed without pretending. One evening, after a long day at the hospital, Amy turned to me. "Maybe we can't fix the past, but maybe we can build something new." I nodded. Maybe. Fall had settled over Portland with that familiar chill that made people pull their jackets tighter and reach for their scarves. The leaves were turning bright orange and red, and the city felt both cozy and a little bit melancholy, like it was ready for change but wasn't quite sure what kind. Amy and I were in that same uncertain place. After everything we'd been through, the fights, the breakups, the painful silences, we found ourselves trying to rebuild something that felt fragile and unsteady. The hospital visits had taken a toll on Amy's family, especially her dad. The doctors weren't optimistic. It was hard to watch someone you once admired so much become a shadow of themselves. Amy leaned on me more during that time. She was raw, vulnerable in ways she'd never been before. But she also pushed me away sometimes, afraid that I'd see her breaking down and think less of her. One night, I caught her sitting on the porch, staring at the stars with tears streaking down her cheeks. "Hey," I said softly, sitting beside her. She didn't say anything for a long time. "I hate this," she finally whispered. "I hate feeling so powerless." "I know," I said. "Me too. Sometimes just being there was enough. No solutions, no advice. Just a quiet presence." Our son, Max, was growing fast, suddenly too big to be carried around like a baby, but still needing us in ways that made everything else seem smaller. We kept up the schedule, weekdays with me, weekends with Amy. Max didn't say much about the tension he probably sensed, but kids have a way of knowing things without words. One afternoon, Amy invited me over for dinner. It was awkward at first, but the conversation soon warmed. "I want us to try counseling," she said. I blinked, surprised but hopeful. Maybe it could help. I agreed. We found a therapist who specialized in co-parenting and relationship repair. Our sessions were uncomfortable at first, digging into the past hurts, exposing the raw edges of old wounds. But slowly, those sessions started to shift something. We learned to listen without interrupting, to express pain without blame, to say the things we'd been afraid to say for years. Outside the therapy room, our lives were still messy. Amy's dad's health worsened. My job was stressful. Max was starting preschool, and with that came new challenges. One evening, Amy and I went out to celebrate Max's first day at school. We sat on a bench near the river, the city lights flickering in the distance. "It's crazy," Amy said. "How much has changed?" I nodded. "And how much is still the same?" She smiled sadly. "You're still the one I want in Max's life." "Always," I said. "But old habits die hard." One night, after too much wine, Amy and I slipped back into the bitterness we'd been trying so hard to leave behind. The argument started small, something about missed messages and late pickups, but it spiraled into accusations, old grievances, and shouting. Max was asleep in his room, thankfully oblivious. When the dust settled, Amy and I looked at each other, exhausted. "I'm sorry," she said. "Me too," I replied. It was clear we weren't perfect. Maybe we never would be. But maybe that was okay. Sometimes love wasn't about grand gestures or perfect endings. Sometimes it was about showing up, even when it was hard. And for Max, for him, we had to keep trying. Winter arrived in Portland with its soft gray skies and the scent of rain in the air. It was a season of quiet reflection, the kind that encourages you to slow down and take stock of what really matters. For Amy and me, that season marked a turning point. After months of therapy, late-night talks, and awkward attempts at compromise, something was shifting beneath the surface. We weren't that young couple anymore, full of reckless hope and dreams that felt invincible. Life had cracked us open, tested our limits, and taught us things no textbook or counselor ever could. But through it all, one thing remained true. We both loved Max fiercely. And for him, we were willing to rewrite the rules of what family meant. Amy's dad had passed quietly in the early days of December. It was a difficult loss, but it brought Amy's family closer in unexpected ways. I attended the small gathering with her, standing quietly in the back, feeling like part of something fragile but real. After the funeral, Amy and I sat in her kitchen, the winter wind rattling the windows. "I don't want us to keep fighting," she said. "Me neither." We made no grand promises that night. No declarations of getting back together or sweeping changes. Instead, we agreed on something simple but powerful: respect, patience, honesty. We would co-parent not as enemies, but as partners. And maybe, just maybe, there was room for friendship. Max was blossoming, curious, bright, and surprisingly resilient. His laughter filled the rooms of both our homes, a reminder that life goes on, no matter how messy it gets. One chilly Saturday, I took Max to the park. We watched the ducks paddle across the pond, his little hands gripping mine as he pointed excitedly. I like it here, he said, eyes wide. Me too, I said, smiling. Later that evening, Amy joined us for dinner. It felt natural, comfortable. Not perfect, but real. We talked about Max's upcoming birthday party, planning together without tension or awkwardness. I think this could work, Amy said softly. I nodded. Maybe family wasn't about the traditional picture-perfect image. Maybe it was about showing up, being present, even when it's complicated. As the snow began to fall lightly outside, I looked at Amy and Max and felt something I hadn't in a long time. Hope. Thanks for listening to this story. Life doesn't always turn out the way we expect. Sometimes, the hardest challenges teach us the most about love and family. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real stories like this.
Thanks for watching. If you liked the story, hit like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more crazy twists. See you in the next one.